There's a thing we used to say about her, back when all of us were younger and stupider and still thought we'd live forever. We said you never saw her twice. Not because she hid. She didn't hide the way people think snipers hide. She just had this way of being there and then not being there, like a thought you can't finish. And the part that made grown men go quiet, men who'd done things they'd never tell their families about, was the second half of it. If she ever looked at you through that glass, really looked, you didn't get a second look at anything. Not the sky. Not your own hands. Nothing. They called her Divine Ghost. I'll tell you how that name happened later, because the story of the name is the story of the whole thing, and you'd miss it if I gave it to you now. My name doesn't matter much. I was her spotter for 2 years and 4 deployments. I'm the guy who lay in the dirt next to her and read the wind and called the numbers and watched her do things I still don't fully believe, and I was there. I'll just say my name was Salas. Diego Salas. People called me Sully because nobody downrange ever uses your real name if they can help it. I want to tell you about one day. One specific day on a ridge in a place I'm not going to name, because the place doesn't matter and the families there have suffered enough without me putting a pin on a map. Just picture mountains, brown and gray and folded over each other like an old man's hands. Picture heat coming up off the rocks so hard the air bends. Picture a valley below us with a little cluster of mud brick houses and a road that wasn't really a road, just a memory of one. That's where it happened. But let me back up. Let me tell you who she was first, because you need to feel her before any of the rest of it lands. Her name was Marin Holloway, Senior Chief. She grew up somewhere flat and quiet, one of those towns where the biggest thing that ever happens is the high school football game on Friday. Her dad taught her to shoot when she was 7, she told me once, on a night when neither of us could sleep. He'd put a single .22 round in her hand and tell her, "That's all you get. Make it count or go home." She said she cried the first dozen times she missed. She did not cry by the time the Navy got hold of her. You have to understand how unusual it was what she was. A woman in that world in those years doing that job. The brass didn't know what to do with her. Half of them wanted to put her on a poster. The other half wanted her to fail quietly so they wouldn't have to think about it. And she just kept being better than everyone, which is the one thing that makes people nervous more than anything else. Not better in a loud way. Marin was never loud. She was better the way the tide is better than the people who try to fight it. JSOC, that's the command that runs the units you've heard whispered about, and the ones you haven't. JSOC was afraid of her. I mean that. I've heard people say it like it's a compliment, and it isn't, not really. They were afraid of her the way you're afraid of a tool that's sharper than your hands can safely hold. Because Marin didn't just shoot. Marin decided. And a soldier who decides is the most dangerous thing on any battlefield, far more than a soldier who only obeys. I'll get to that, that's the heart of it. So the ridge, the valley, the heat. We've been up there since before dawn, the 2 of us, plus a small element of guys holding the high ground behind us. The mission was simple on paper, which is how you know it was about to go sideways. There was a man down in that village we'd been hunting for a long time, a facilitator, a money guy who turned money into worse things. We had eyes on the house. We had been told he'd come to a meeting that morning, and we had been told very clearly that if he came, he did not leave. That was the order. He does not leave. We crawled into position in the dark and we waited. That's the part nobody puts in the movies, the waiting. Hours of it. Your hips go numb. A fly lands on your lip and you can't move to brush it off because movement is the thing that gets you killed. You lie there and you become part of the mountain. Marin was better at the waiting than anyone I ever met. She could go so still I'd forget she was breathing. I'd check sometimes, just to be sure she was alive. The sun came up over the far ridge, slow and orange and ugly. The village woke up the way villages do. A rooster somewhere. A dog. Smoke from a cook fire going straight up because there wasn't a breath of wind yet. 2 old men came out and sat against a wall and didn't say anything to each other, just sat, the way old men everywhere sit. A woman threw water out of a doorway. And kids, there were kids. I want you to hold on to that. There were children down there, the way there are always children, running between the houses, chasing each other, doing the only thing children know how to do anywhere on earth, which is be loud and alive and completely unafraid because nobody has taught them yet what there is to be afraid of. Maren saw them before I did. She always saw everything before I did. "Sully," she said, just my name, real quiet, lips barely moving. "I see 'em," I said. She didn't answer, she just kept her eye on the glass. Around 09:30 the vehicles came. Two of them kicking up dust on the Notch Road, and they pulled up to the house we'd been watching, and men got out. And one of them, I felt Maren go very, very still beside me, the kind of still that's the opposite of relaxed. One of them was him. The man, the facilitator, older than his photos, heavier. He moved like a man who'd never once in his life had to run from anything, and I hated him on sight, which I'm not proud of, but I'm being honest with you. She got the call in, confirmed, voice flat as a table. Command came back. You know what they said, he does not leave. And here's where I need you to slow down with me. Because the next 90 seconds are the whole thing. Everything that made her who she was, everything that made them afraid of her, everything they put on her record, and everything they couldn't bring themselves to write down, it all lived in the next 90 seconds, on that ridge, in that heat, with the rooster still going somewhere down below. The man stood in the open, clear shot, maybe 450 meters. For Maren, that was nothing. That was a Tuesday. I'd seen her thread shots through gaps you couldn't get a credit card into at twice that distance. I called the wind. Light, left to right, picking up a little as the morning warmed the rock. I gave her the number. She breathed out, long and slow, the way she always did, that breath that meant the next thing that happened was final. And then she didn't shoot. I waited for the crack, it didn't come. "Ghost," I said, "we used call signs when it got real. You're clear, take it." "Negative," she said. I looked. I tore my eye off my own glass and looked through hers in my head, tried to see what she was seeing. A little girl. A little girl, maybe 5, 6 years old, had wandered out from between two houses chasing a goat or a dog or a ghost of her own, and she had stopped God. She had stopped right behind the man. Right behind him. In line. If Maren took the shot and that round did what that round was built to do, it would not have stopped at the man. You understand me, it would not have stopped. Command was in our ears. He does not leave, take the shot, confirm, take the shot. And Maren Holloway, lying in the dirt with the most dangerous skill set on that entire mountain, said one word into the radio. "Stand by." Stand by to the people who could end her career with a sentence. Stand by. I have thought about that word more times than I can count. I've thought about it at 3 in the morning in my own bed years later, safe, with my wife breathing next to me, and I've thought about how much it cost her to say it. Because she knew. She knew that if that man got back in his vehicle and drove away, there would be a meeting somewhere with men in clean uniforms asking her why she disobeyed a direct order, and there would be no good way to explain to a room what a 5-year-old looks like through a rifle scope. There's no slide for that, there's no acronym. She chose the harder thing. She chose to be the one who had to answer for it. That's where I'll leave you for now. Her finger off the trigger. The girl in the dust. The man about to climb back into that truck and disappear, and the whole weight of it sitting on one woman who decided, in the space of a breath, that some orders cost more than they're worth. I'll tell you what she did next, and I promise you it's not what you think. So there she was, off the trigger, the radio crawling all over her. The man down below dusting off his hands like he had all the time in the world, because as far as he knew he did. And the little girl just stayed. You know how kids do. She'd found something in the dirt, a bottle cap, a beetle, who knows. She crouched down right behind the man and got absolutely fascinated by it, the way only a child can be, and the world's most wanted facilitator stood there scratching his neck and had no idea that 2 feet behind him was the only thing on earth keeping him alive. I was sweating through everything I owned, not from the heat anymore, from the math. I was running it over and over. Angle, drop, the fact that he was about to move. Once he got in that truck, we were done. They'd pull us off the ridge and that man would go back to turning money into funerals, and there was nothing we could do about it without taking that child with him. Sully, Maren said, calmer than she had any right to be. Talk to me about the rock. What rock? I said. The corner of the house. The near corner, the stone one. Read it for me. I looked. There was a wall coming off the front of the target's house. A low wall of stacked stone the way they build them out there, and at the corner there was one big flat-faced stone, gray, catching the morning sun, about waist high, maybe 1.5 meters to the man's left. It's stone, I said. Hard, flat face angled maybe, I don't know, 40 degrees off you away. Why? She didn't answer the why. She never answered the why until after. Give me the corner, she said. Dead center of the flat face, same wind. And I understood, or I started to, and the part of me that knew anything about physics screamed that it couldn't be done, and the part of me that knew Maren Holloway shut that other part up. She wanted to ricochet it. You have to understand what she was asking of herself. A direct shot, 450, no wind, she could do that in her sleep. But she wasn't going to take the man directly because the man was a wall away from a child. She was going to put a round into the face of a stone at an angle and let the stone do what stone does, and send that round around the corner into the only thing she wanted it to touch. I have shot for 20 years. I have read more ballistics than I've read anything else in my life, including the Bible my mother gave me. And I'm telling you, what she was describing is not in the books. Stone is not a mirror. Stone is chaos. You hit a rock with a rifle round and it can do anything. It can shatter, it can skip flat, it can come straight back at you, it can dig in and die. You cannot aim a ricochet. Nobody can aim a ricochet. Except she'd been reading that valley for 4 hours. She'd been reading the light on that stone since the sun came up. She knew the angle of the face better than the man who'd stacked it there. She knew the way the morning had baked it. And somewhere behind those flat gray eyes of hers, she'd already run the math that I couldn't even start. The man bent to get in the truck. Confirm, she said, just to me. Not the radio. Off the radio, just to me, like we were the only 2 people in the world, which, in the way that mattered, we were. I should have said no. Every regulation I'd ever sworn to said no. Every careful, by-the-book bone in my body said you do not bet a man's life and a little girl's life on a trick shot off a rock. I looked at the girl. I looked at the man. I looked at the back of Maren's head, the sweat-dark hair, the absolute stillness of her. Confirmed, I said, send it. She breathed out. The rifle barked once, just once. That flat, hard crack that rolls down a valley and comes back to you a half-second later off the far wall. And I swear to you, on everything I have, I watched it happen, and my brain refused to file it as real for about 3 full seconds. The round hit the face of that stone. I saw the puff, the little gray flower of dust, and it changed. It went around. It went around the corner of that wall like it had eyes, like it knew exactly where it was going, and it found the man at the exact instant he turned his head, and it was over. He went down between the open door and the seat, and he did not get up, and he did not make a sound, and the little girl behind the wall never even looked up from her bottle cap. She never knew. To this day, wherever that girl is, if she's alive and grown, she has no idea that one morning a woman on a mountain 1,000 meters away chose her life over a perfect shot, and then bent the laws of physics so she wouldn't have to choose at all. The valley went silent the way it does. Then the screaming started down by the truck, men yelling, doors slamming, the kind of panic that means they have no idea where it came from. And that was the other thing about Maren. They never knew where she was. She didn't fire from where they'd look. She didn't fire twice. One round off a rock from a position they'd never find, and a man who'd haunted us for 2 years was simply, suddenly, not a problem anymore. The radio was losing its mind. Command wanted to know what just happened. Command wanted a confirmation, a description, a body, a reason. Maren keyed the radio. Her voice didn't shake. It never shook. Target down, she said. Single round, no collateral. A pause. Say again your method, command said. We had eyes, we had a no-shoot, say again your method. And here's the part I love. Here's the part that's so completely her. She looked at me, and for the first time all morning the corner of her mouth moved, not a smile. Marin didn't really do smiles, but something close, some cousin of one. She keyed the radio and she said, "Hand of God, sir." That was it, that was all she'd give them, hand of God. We packed up and ghosted off that ridge before the dust in the valley had even settled, the way we always did, leaving nothing behind, not a shell casing, not a scuff, nothing for anyone to find. By the time the men down there got organized enough to start searching the high ground, there was no high ground left to search. We were gone. We were never there. You never saw her twice. That's where the name came from, not from us, from them, from the people on the other side of it. Word got around the way word does, even out there, maybe especially out there, that there was a shooter the Americans had who could take a man through solid stone, who could put a round somewhere there was no line to put it, who was never where you'd look, who was, they started saying, a ghost, and not just a ghost, something that shot like it had permission from somewhere higher than any general. Divine ghost. It got back to us months later, the name, through the kind of channels that names travel through, and Marin just shrugged when she heard it, like it was somebody else's name, like she hadn't earned every single syllable of it lying in the dirt being braver than the rest of us combined. But I'm not done, because the part of this story that matters most isn't the shot. Anybody can tell you about a shot. The part that matters is what happened to her after, what it cost. Because choosing the harder right thing on that ridge didn't make her life easier. It almost ended her. Let me tell you about the room with the clean uniforms, the one I told you she knew was coming. It came about a week later, back at the base, in one of those rooms with no windows and a long table and a smell of old coffee and bad air conditioning. They convened a board. That's the polite word for it. A board. To look into the conduct of Senior Chief Marin Holloway on the morning in question, regarding a direct order, a stated no-shoot that became a shot, and a method of engagement that, and I am quoting a man who actually said this out loud, is not recognized as a sanctioned technique. They were not, you understand, angry that the man was dead. That was the mission. They were angry that they couldn't explain it. They were angry that she'd said stand by to a command order. They were angry, I think if I'm being honest, the way men get angry when something happens that they can't control and didn't predict and don't understand, and the only thing in the room they can point at is the person who did it. I was called in to give my account. I told them the truth. I told them about the girl. I told them what a 5-year-old looks like behind a target through 10 power of magnification. I watched some of them not be able to hold my eyes when I said it. And then somebody, some staff officer with creases in his trousers who'd never lain in dirt in his life, said the thing. He said, "Senior Chief, you disobeyed a direct order. The target was clear per the rules of engagement. You had no authority to delay." And Marin, who had sat through all of it with her hands flat on the table and her back straight as a flagpole, finally spoke. She said, "Sir, the target was clear of the rules of engagement. He was not clear of the child." The room got very quiet. She went on. She didn't raise her voice. Marin never raised her voice. She said, "You gave me an order to take a shot. You did not give me your eyes. I had my eyes. And what my eyes saw was a man you wanted dead, standing in front of a kid who hadn't done anything to anybody. You can write me up for the second I waited. You can write me up for all of it. But I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm sorry that I gave a 5-year-old the rest of her life. I'll take whatever you've got. I won't take that." I have never in my life heard a room of powerful men have less to say. They didn't end her. They couldn't, not really, not after that, not without it becoming exactly the kind of story they spend their whole careers making sure never gets told. But they didn't reward her either. There was no medal. You don't get a medal for a shot that officially never happened with a technique that officially doesn't exist on a target that officially was someone else's problem. They quietly moved her sideways. They thanked her for her service in that way that means we'd like you to be somebody else's headache now. And within the year, Maren Holloway was out. She didn't fight it. That surprised me at the time. She'd fought for everything her whole life, fought to get into rooms women weren't supposed to be in, fought to be twice as good to be counted half as much. And then when the time came, she just let go, set the rifle down, walked out into the regular world the way you'd walk out of a movie theater into afternoon light, blinking, a little lost. I asked her about it once years later. We stayed in touch the way people who have shared dirt stay in touch, not often but real. We were sitting on her back porch somewhere quiet and flat, a place a lot like the town she'd grown up in, and there was a dog at her feet and a beer going warm in my hand, and I asked her if she ever regretted it. The shot, the standby, the whole thing that cost her the only work she'd ever really loved. She thought about it a long time. Maren always thought about things a long time. No, she said finally, I think about the girl. Sometimes I wonder what she's doing, whether she's happy, whether she ever got married, had her own kids. She took a sip. I'll never know. That's the deal. You do the right thing in the dark and you don't get to see how it turns out. You just have to be okay not knowing. She looked out at the field, going gold in the evening. They were scared of me, she said, and there was no pride in it, just tiredness. I always knew that. They thought I was scared of the wrong things, that I'd hesitate, that a woman would hesitate. She shook her head slow. I never hesitated, Sully, not once. Hesitating is when you don't know what to do. I always knew exactly what to do. That's a different thing. They just didn't like my answer. We sat there a while after that, didn't say much. The dog sighed and rolled over. The light went from gold to gray to gone. I think about her all the time now. Maren Holloway, the divine ghost, the shooter JSOC was afraid of, the one no enemy ever saw twice, the one whose name traveled across mountains on the tongues of men who never figured out she was a woman, lying in the dirt, doing the math no one else could do. And here's the thing I want you to take with you, the thing I finally understood on that porch with the warm beer and the dying light. They feared the wrong thing about her. They thought the dangerous part was the shooting. It wasn't. Anybody can be taught to pull a trigger. The dangerous part, the part that made the powerful nervous, the part that no board could process and no medal could honor, was that she would not pull it for the wrong reason. That she had a line and she'd put her whole life on the other side of it before she'd cross it. The deadliest person on that mountain was also the only one in the whole story who refused to kill a child. And that, more than any shot off any rock, is what made her a ghost they couldn't catch and couldn't replace and couldn't ever quite forget. You never saw her twice, that was the legend. The truth is simpler and it's bigger. She only ever needed to be seen once, by the one little girl who never even knew she was there.